I need to start the little Trek 520 project, but I'm procrastinating. So I don't know which way I want to go. I have two different handlebars I want to use on it. I have a Velo Orange Rendener bar, and I have a Nitto something or other Chromo Cool Silky bar. And I also have a little Velo Orange front rack. First I want to go rando or Bridgin Stone or Ribbon Stone, but Trekkin Stone? Trekkin, Ribbon Trek. And I also feel the same way about this early 60s Allegra I got. I like it. It's a little too tall for me. Paint's not as nice as it looks in photos and stuff. I think I want to pull it apart and take a look at it. Let's see if this back hub's any good. I'm trying to decide if I should respace this out to 130. Build it up with a boring 10-speed Tiagra group I got for it. Or save this Nova Record back hub, build in a 650B wheel set, maybe use the front hub, but maybe use a dynamo hub. I don't really ride a lot after dark anymore. 650B, this dude, take over my old partner Mark Belladonna's frame builder shop, and maybe add candy bosses for 650B. If I was feeling rich, maybe I'd go on eBay and see if I can find some Mayfac Raids, put them on there, which would be ridiculous, but cool. You know, I'd have to find some brakes that are really cool and just what I want. And 650B, this bad boy, maybe add pump pegs, you know, maybe do kind of most of the mods. Make this my everyday city bike, this old weird bike. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to strip it down. I'm going to see if that bottom bracket's savable, see if that headset's savable, see if this back hub's savable. Maybe that'll give me a better idea of what I want to do. Converting to 700C by 32s would be much, much, much easier. There's plenty of room, but it wouldn't fix the bike being too big for me. 732 is only about 4 or 5 millimeters smaller than a 27 1/4. 650B though is going to be at least a centimeter. 650B is more like a 723. So I mean, at least a centimeter. And that'd probably make this thing fit perfect. But do I want a bug mark, and do I want to start messing with frame building again? Is that going to make me go totally insane? Is that going to make me totally upend my life? To figure a way to be able to start frame building whenever I want. And all of a sudden having customers and doing work and getting all stressed out, starting a whole other business. These are all real possibilities. So let's mess with this first before we decide my entire rest of future trajectory of my entire rest of my life. Maybe let's just play with this bike a little bit, see what's savable and what's not. It's a pretty tight wheel. Moment of truth. Feels no play. Not a real bad spot. Feels medium bad. Could just be a tight hub. Or it could be Brunel and worthless. Let's find out. It's got a later Suntour 5-speed freewheel. So I need a 2-prong Suntour freewheel tool. You will destroy your tool and probably not get the freewheel free unless you clamp it onto that rim. So with Shimano you can get away with not skipping this step, but with Suntour stuff you cannot. So got this clamped in here. Drop it in this vise. Clamp it in this vise, drop it down. Use my whole body to try and get leverage on this and hopefully break it free. Oh, yay! Woohoo! So cool! Loosening up this quick release a little bit so I can turn this freewheel by hand. I don't know if these wheels are original to this bike or not. I have to clean this up a little bit. I'm going to scrape some of this off and see. And this is a French bike. You know, it's a Swiss bike with French threaded stuff. Maybe this hub's French threaded. That's hard to tell without special tools and stuff, and I don't really know how or care. But French threaded freewheels usually have an M stamped on them somewhere. Sometimes you can get in here, see if you can find that little M stamped on here. So I'm just going to scrape some of this old 20 or 30 or 40-year-old grease off. See if there's an M stamped in here. And maybe I'll try an English one, but a lot of French and English stuff, it's hard to tell because the English stuff will thread right on, just really loosey-goosey, and then so the better to actually have a French thing to try and scrape it on and see. I don't remember if it's on the free hub, I think it is, and not on this lock ring, but scrape that. I'm not seeing any M. It's no guarantee, but hopefully not French threaded. Yeah, this measures 120, so it's probably not the original wheels. It's really tight. It's probably 126, however. I think they were made some old French stuff, some 122s and 124s and weird stuff like that. Remember we should measure it. It's kind of hard to measure a hub with spokes and junk in the way, so I'm just going to get it a little eyeball-y. A lot more than that. It's only measuring like 122 by eyeball, so it could be 120 or 126, but or it could be weird in Frenchies. Maybe I'm going to try a different freewheel on just to see. Here's a big, ugly, modern Shimano. 99% sure that that's English threaded. It feels a little loosey-goosey, but I mean, not very. Let's try this Sun Tour one, see if it feels any looser or any tighter. Feels just as loose. I think it's probably English threaded. It's very exciting. If it was French or something, I'd go right up on eBay to a collector. I ain't messing around with French threaded freewheels and French threaded hubs. That's a step too far. Now I'm going to open this hub on both sides and see how them cones look. I'm a big guy. I personally think I'm much too heavy to ride freewheel wheels anymore, and I've broken a lot. The only ones I've never broken are vintage campy. It's still pretty heavy, probably heavier than it was anytime I've ever ridden vintage campy stuff, so I'm trying to talk myself into riding this old campy stuff is ridiculous. And what trailer am I going to use? What freewheel? Like, how am I going to get a big enough gear range? What cranks? Like, it's all ridiculous. I should do this with a modern. Stupid stuff I already have. I don't know, but I got to know. Lots of play. Pushing in hard on the cone. That feels real smooth. These rims aren't worn out. I wonder if they're round or true or if they're worth anything. People used to care about vintage rims, but not as much anymore. Well, let's get the rest of this thing naked before we play with those wheels. So once I open those wheels and they get real dirty, I'm going to want to open the wheels on the Track 522 and just get it all done all at once. Cheap, beat up, nothing special pedals. Really don't care. Brakes will be easier. Let's get these bad boys off too. Jerkwad. You're not an 8 and you're not a 10. That seems very French. Even though I think these pedals are English. It's very annoying anyways. Let's make things off standard sizes. Universal 61. Bike is so dusty. He's doing some real fine light powder. First I thought it was like Burning Man Playa, which is like evil. But now I think it's probably some like woodworker dust, which is pretty tolerable. I think that's original. The barrel adjuster on this guy's broken. So if I can get it out of the body, I have lots of extra barrel adjusters around, that's why I save stuff like that. And maybe I can save these cross-top levers and get 10 or 12 bucks for them on the old eBay. Maybe. Because they're not the kind of thing I use anymore. Maybe on some fixed gear builds or whatever, but they're very much in the way and they make your brakes mushy. And I know some old men like them because they want to pretend like they can ride drop bars, but really just always ride in the cross-top position. But I don't care. They cause me problems. I don't like them. Well, Yeah, play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. It's a $60, 60-year-old Swiss French bike. It has some issues. So the same problem in the PX10. This is just a weird size and shape. I don't have any sort of tools for the fix cup. It's bigger than 36, smaller than 40. So I might take a 36, got a lot of those, and file one down a little bit so I can get it on there and something locked on. That's not the biggest one of the problems. The headset came off, and like a lot of old French bikes that were cheap and had a hard life, this upper cup pretty much falls right in and out by just hand. I can go around and add some stippling to this cup and the inside of the headset, so what we'll probably do, we'll take a little sharp nail and a hammer and whack, 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 and make a bunch of little dents in the nail, because the little dents in the nail actually push metal in where the nail is, and push metal up around it like little fingers. You usually only see that on bottom cups, and somewhere is the fork loose. So who knows, this could have been like this forever. It looks machined in there and fine. I mean, it's definitely looser than the machining right below it. You definitely feel a little lip in some parts, because the cup is shallow and the machine tool is a little longer. I'm going to look this up. I think French is basically the same as JIS, so if that's true, I can ream and face this out to English, no problem. But that means I won't be able to use the original fork or headset. The fork is French. It does have a few damaged threads. They don't seem to be a problem. I took that stock lock nut and just dumped a bunch of cutting oil on it and just went back and forth all the way up and down a few times. It won't go all the way down. I get stuck like halfway, but I get stuck below where it needs to be. If I had a real French die, I could clean it up. If I had an old French lock nut, I could put some slots in it and really pinch it down with some pliers and kind of use it like a die. I think I might somewhere, I might look. But I think this will be fine. But old French stuff's scary too, because the forks are really, really short. And these old stock French headsets are real low stack height, so you can't get a new French headset. You can find a new old stock one. Maybe it'll solve some of your problems. You can't use like the VO. The VO has a really tall stack height, like a JAS, and you absolutely will not be able to get the top lock nut on. And if you do, you get like one thread and it'll strip out and try and lock it down. The VO one was a big mistake. The VO one will work great if you use a fork off a different French bike that's a centimeter or two too tall. So if I had this, say I had a green Peugeot U08 and had a wrecked fork and a dead headset, there's lots of green U08s out there and white U08s out there. I can go find a different fork off of, this is like a 59, if I found one off a 61, that'd be great. Then I can use a VO headset all day long. I do have to check with this fork. The whole point of this bike is that I love the old French fork flip. It's a gorgeous rake instead of like a boring little one in the middle, all of it at the bottom. If I do want a 650B this bike, that's a whole other thing. I'd have to build a new fork. Probably. It's probably too narrow. I'm going to go play with it and measure it some. Maybe it'll work if I really, notch the shit out of the fenders and that kind of stuff. I've done that. It's not ideal, but if I made a new fork with a wider crown, solve all my problems, I could use an English steerer, make it taller, green this all out and use all English ISO headsets. And that's what I would do if I sell the shop. All the old bikes always got new forks because they're just too narrow and everyone wants to do 650B and hard mounts and all the stuff, and you can't. This old fork's gorgeous, and I want to keep this thing as budget as possible, so I really might try and use it all. The headset does not look bad. There's a little bit of brunelling like in this cup in the back, so I might pop it out and flip it around. The back is where most of the tension is, so if I flip it around and have a nice clean spot on the back, and the barely bad spot all in the front, I'll probably never feel it the way it is. Usually it's the crown race that gets, oh yeah, there's a little teeny bit off to the side on the crown race. Just the little bit of pitting you can only see in the light. So if I pop this crown race off and turn it around, but it's only off to the side, which is interesting, and not in the back, I will never notice it. It's so minor. I'm probably just going to overhaul this stuff. Headsets aren't like bottom brackets or hubs. Like you barely turn your bars. They can really be pretty bad, and people don't notice or care. So if I can save this cool old fork, I'm gonna. Still debating on 650B. I'm gonna go stick this on my rando bike and see how the clearance looks. I also have the clearance checker tool. Maybe I should just do that real quick. Yeah. Okay, let's do that for the video. It'll be cool. Here is a rear axle with a quick release in it. I think I have these cones left loose. There's lots of extra threading, so I can change the axle size on this guy. I got it set at 130, it can go down to 126, 120, wherever we want. I can't really use the quick release with it being weird sizes, but I can sort of just thread it out, kind of make it tight enough to sort of just sit in here. I've showed this in previous videos. This is rossmancycles.com. He sells these for 20 or 35 bucks or something like that. The new one's way cooler than this old one. One day I'm feeling rich, I'll buy it. But it's got different wheel sizes and different tire sizes. So I want to know 650B 42. You really can't fit 42s in most conversions. The biggest it'll fit is like a 38. So if this looks like it'll clear, they'll all probably clear. So I go to 700, 650B 26, 42, plug it in. So the hanger will hang on the dummy axle. Sort of center it. Sort of careful. This 42 clears. It's real tight. It's not too tight. It's with the wheel all the way back. So 38 would probably be fine. Although I usually like to run the wheel all the way forward with long vertical dropouts like this because I want to be able to get a good fender line. So I need the wheel as far forward as possible so it doesn't have to mash into the fender too much to drop it out the front. And 42 is definitely too tight. 38 would probably even be a little tight. 38's running a little small, would be nicer. So maybe get it back a little bit, have kind of not as pretty fender line. Up here is no problem, all the clearance in the world. I'm going to throw a ugly long pole brake on here just to see if that would be cool. So here's the Tektro R559s, they're long reach brake. Basically what I'm going to guess is we'll clear that tire, and you know about where the rim is going to be. It's going to be down here. The tire ain't. So just about like that. So it looks like it'll clear 42 and a fender real tight. It'll clear. But what's it look like on a bike? Way too high. A lot of conversions will clear. Maybe all the way down. Maybe. So that's one thing to take in mind, like what brakes you use if you convert it. A Raid would probably clear. I don't think I have one sitting around though. I have one on my bike, I can go measure them. Even with the pads all the way down, I don't know if that would clear. There's a lot of clearance on this bike. Because it was for 27, 1 1/4. If it was for 700, 32s, maybe it would clear. Speaking of other weird issues with $60 vintage beat up French bikes, has mismatched crank bolts, only has one dust cap and it's all stripped out. Cranks aren't quite blown out. They look pretty good. Pedals came out. They're a little better than I thought. Clearly the chainring bolt's all frozen, so he just switched it from a 2x to a 1x. So that's all good stuff. Got a beautiful old fork and crown. The Rene Hurst crowns, the Kaise crowns, look just like this. It's hollow. Like this bike's actually really light for taking a 26.6 seat post. Here is a 100mm front dummy axle. Bang-a-rang. So 650B 42 clears. And honestly, just a 1/4 inch on each side. It's enough room for a fender. I was trying to talk myself out of 650 being this bike. But this is kind of telling me, hey bro, you really ought to 650B this bike. You see that clearance? At least 20mm here. Yeah, at least 5 or 6 on each side. Dang. The easiest and safest way, what I would say, if I was still frame building and somebody brought me this in as a project, the easiest and safest way would be candy bosses. Put them out nice and wide for a modern silver Tektro style brake. Most vintage brakes work great on a nice wide boss. Most vintage stuff's really narrow and a nightmare to try and put fat rims in or anything, so you really want to put a modern width, even if you want to use vintage brakes. Mostly. Even like Diacomps, I mean like old Mayfax and stuff, they're going to sit too narrow if you try and do them to the stock specs, because today's rims are wider and they were too narrow right from the factory, so even those I would widen up quite a bit. And Diacomps Mayfax pads, moving in and out a lot. The whiter, the better. The more pads showing, the more width, the more leverage, the more everything. Better, better, better. I think guys like to have the pads slammed against the brake to make it not chatter. Maybe that's the thing. But everything's always too tight, so it's not really a problem. Oof. I think the fork's savable and fine. God, I could really do something stupid like braze this whole thing and then tap it out to English. And just the brass? Is that totally psychotic? I don't know. I'm still going to clean the inside and play with it and see if I can get a 22.2 stem in. Worst case, I could file a 22 stem a little bit, or use an old Japanese stem that was a fake French size, but still a 25.4. The stem I pulled out of here is definitely undersized. It's 25.0 only, will not go over 25.4 bar. I have to get those reamers though, and I got nothing to lose. I could try and ream that old stem out. Just a hair. It's most likely to get a catch in the groove, like the slots filed across, and wreck it. But that stem has like a weird sort of groove catcher thing. The bolt itself is grooved, so that might help guide it. It's already pretty scrapey-uppy. It wouldn't take much. The stem's a little ugly, but just a little bit of cleaning with the file, and a little bit of deburring wheel and polishing. If I was at the shop, I could save this stem. But I'm not. Doing all my work at home is a way bigger pain. The strong light bottom bracket has a couple of tiny little pits in it, but not bad enough to really notice I could reuse that bottom bracket. Do you reuse these cranks and just ride old French cranks till I break them? It's kind of sexier to reuse those campy hubs. I haven't opened them yet. I'm going to do that next. Reuse those campy hubs if they're not dead. But I'm not going to spend like $300 having a wheel set built with new rims and spokes and labor and all that stuff, unless those hubs are perfect. So the rest of the stuff I can get away with kind of beater, but do not spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a nice wheel set with dead hubs. It just seems very silly and short-sighted. Most people do everything silly and short-sighted, then try and sell their silly short-sighted projects right away, and that's not fair to the next guy. So I'm going to keep investigating on this bike a little bit. I'm going to put it out of the way, and then we'll start the Trek 520. That's what I keep telling myself, that's the plan. So I'm going to open these hubs up and clean up these parts some more. And figure out a way to get that bottom bracket cup out. Or if I'm just going to reuse it, I'll just do it at the PX10 and just clean it from the other side. Leave it in the frame, it's nice and tight. Yeah. I threw this brake on the front, I put the pads all the way down. You can see on this bad boy, these guys slide in a few millimeters too low. These are fine. They can slide up all day long. You can definitely run this fork 650B with these long, ugly Tektros. I'm going to double check that rear, you know. Ooh. I mean, the rear, I might be trying to tell myself what I want to hear. This has a few millimeters of wiggle down here. It's really made for like an anvil-style dummy axle, not just some old axle, but it's pretty close. And, you know, the brake's not bolted on, so it can wiggle and shake a few millimeters too. So I could be lying to myself after 3 or 4 millimeters. But if I'm not, this thing is like perfect. Just barely. Might actually reach. Can also do sketchy stuff and make the slot in the brake a little bit longer. Take a round file and just file it down a couple millimeters on both sides. Can't really do much up here. Some old campy brakes have like a drop brake bolt that won't really work. You can't really replace the Tektro with a drop brake bolt. I've seen guys do sketchy stuff. You can bolt this into a thick plate and then another bolt from that thick plate run into the actual hole in the frame. So that drop at 5 or 6 millimeters just like that. So do some sketchy stuff and make it a little loosey-goosey, but cannies are still the best. If it's wide enough, raids might be alright too. Hard mount studs. But I'd rather do cannies or raids on my other bike, and they're a bunch of finicky nonsense on their own. But it would be sexy. Horizontal dropouts are terrible for bikes with fenders. You can't get the fender line very good because the wheels come forward into the fender real hard to drop out. Vertical dropouts are awesome for that. You can't single speed bikes with vertical dropouts very easy, but you can drop the wheel right in and out to get the fender line really nice. I don't have to futz or fight with it. Well, I got all the parts off the Allegro. I got them all scrubbed up, scoped out. The original steel leotard pedals, he said, might have a bent axle, so I'll have to actually play with those a little bit more. He said the Grand Sport brass rear derailleur might be bent, but he might just not have known how to wind the spring. The headset, bottom bracket, and all those cups have some really minor Brunel or pitting, like really minor. Reusable on a beater bike. For sale to someone for a rider condition beater bike. But you know, poor front derailleur cleaned up. It was so red and orange and rusty, but it cleaned up pretty well. The brakes I'm definitely going to sell. The Campy hub, you know, the cone has a very minor, almost unnoticeable amount of Brunel. It's not perfect, so I don't know if I want to rebuild on it, but it's so minor I really could. But the very fun thing, oh, this one says Campy 10x26, but the very fun thing is on the lock nut. It is stamped Camp 60. I believe this is how they do the date codes on these. I've seen them 72, 73, 74. You know, I've had some ones like that. But 60, does that mean this hub is from 1960? Does that mean this whole bike is from 1960? I think that'd be really cool. My truck is from 1960, so it'd be kind of extra fun in a weird, fun way. So the parts are cleaned up. I still haven't decided what to do. The spokes on the 27-inch wheels, I was trying to decide if I'm going to save them or not. The spokes are real thin, and they're real loose, and they're real old and rusty and junk. I think I'm going to cut them out, and I still considering the 650B, but I am not sure. So that is it on this bike for now. I have to make the tough decision of how to build her up. If I still had my shop, I would pop some candy bosses on this right away. If I decide I want to use all this little French stuff though, like if I still have my shop, I had several sets of vintage Mayfac bosses. I'd probably pop Mayfac bosses on, put Mayfac candies on to make my life hell. But make this bike even cooler. Could also do something psychotic. I have a really nice early 90s Motive mountain bike with Dior XT in perfect shape, and no one seems to care about it. Could build this up to replace Nothing Special Schwinn by using the Dior XT back hub and build it to 650B or 700 and tapping this out to English and use the Dior XT bottom bracket cranks, do the 1x. What an odd fellow that would be. The 1960 French strong-lighted vintage bike done up with XT stuff. And the rusty strong-light headset. Where else am I going to get a nice French headset? That would be a ridiculous bike. God, I was looking at Mayfac candies on eBay last night. There's some deals. There are some deals. Just popping some 650B bosses right on. Be pretty hot. I don't know. I think that's probably what's going to happen. I just have to decide if I want to use the modern Tiagra group I have, which seems like sacrilege to me. Make this like a real neo-retro build. Or if I want, but I have it. Or if I want to build it with all this old, finicky, crappy French stuff, which is gorgeous, sexy, and cool, but that I would probably break. Isn't quite right, and only has 170 cranks, which is too small for me, but I probably wouldn't notice or care, honestly. Probably get over it. Tricky business. Well, thanks for watching.